Intense storytelling, wacky companions, and enough space battles to satisfy even the biggest sci-fi freaks. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and this is our special preview of Obsidian Entertainment's upcoming game, The Outer Worlds 2. Since The Outer Worlds 2 was announced, I'll admit I have been greatly anticipating this game. I always thought the first game had a bit of an interesting run, and I never quite understood why. You'd expect an action role-playing game with zany characters, decent gunplay, and interesting loot to do a bit better than 20,000 concurrent players, but that's where The Outer Worlds peaked. Now that's not saying much because one of our other favorite game studios, Gunfire Games, experienced something similar when going from their first game, Remnant from the Ashes, to Remnant 2. They saw a huge spike in the player base starting from a more modest number, around 50,000, to well over 100,000 concurrent players at their peak. My point is, just because a game is a sequel doesn't mean it can't grow its audience, and I think The Outer Worlds 2 has as good a shot as any to expand that audience multiple times over. Our preview covered the intro cinematic, character creation, and first mission, which ended up being about an hour's worth of content, give or take a couple minutes, and the first thing I'll say is that The Outer Worlds 2 is leaning into the over-the-top writing that they were flirting with in the first game. This is now a full-blown space opera, and that means you get the full range of emotions and excess.
We've been hit by one of those space anomalies.
Buddy?
And the piloting system is down.
Buddy?
The astrogator's gears are shot!
Get a hold of yourself. You're an Earth Directorate agent.
Affirmative, Commander.
I fully expect the team to carry this throughout the entire game, but don't take that as a sign that this game is campy or unserious, because just in our first hour, there is a whole lot of drama too.
You think this is some kind of joke? The Protectorate are the worst of the worst and will not hesitate to string you up if you're caught, if you're lucky. They think nothing of regularly chemically lobotomizing their own subjects for even the slightest error. Your life isn't the only one at risk here.
It's a spectrum, and while the original game did that to a degree, I expect the extremes of both the humor and the drama to be pushed to their absolute limit, because I believe that's what makes The Outer Worlds unique in the current landscape of games. At the very core of The Outer Worlds 2 are the narrative choices you'll make that'll influence the story. This kicks off right from the very beginning with the choices you make during character customization, and it starts with your background. You'll choose from 6 preset choices, and each represents who you were before joining the Earth Directorate. That sounds nice, but it actually ties into the gameplay. For example, as a renegade, I had different dialogue options during some of the conversations I had during the preview. This choice also influences things outside of conversations. At one point, I was searching through a science lab and came across a blackboard filled with information. If I had chosen the professor background, I would have been able to interact with it. What's clear is that we're going to see a range of options available to us as players based on our choice of background. That carries over into the next section, traits, which are tied more closely to gameplay but act in a similar way. When creating your character, you have the option to choose up to 2 positive traits, but if you do that, you also need to take a negative trait. These traits directly influence some aspect of the gameplay, enhancing your combat, giving you access to new interactables, or helping you prevent death directly. For example, if I had taken the brawny trait, I would have been able to unjam this door in the first area. I didn't, so my other option is to have Engineering 1, and that ties into the next system, Skills. Much like other RPGs of this nature, you get to choose just 2 starting skills, 3 if you chose the Brilliant trait. These provide substantial gameplay benefits and shape your playstyle early on, but as you just saw, having something like Engineering also gives you the opportunity to engage with interactables within the world. You'll obviously get access to more of these skills as you level up your character, but these early decisions are meaningful. To round out character creation, we also need to customize our avatar, and while this is by no means an area of games that I consider myself very creative, I think Obsidian, as they did with Avowed, strikes a nice balance with giving players lots of options and the ability to tweak those options without going so full tilt that you need a PhD just to understand how to create the look of your character. Once you create your character and lock in all of your choices, the adventure begins in earnest, and from the start, you're flooded with the game's story. The stakes, they're pretty high.
If you or any member of your team are captured, you will be on your own. There will be no rescue. We cannot afford for this to turn into an intergalactic incident.
You play as an agent of the Earth Directorate, and just based on the first few minutes of the game's narrative, it's pretty clear you don't always play by the rules, which gives you a ton of latitude when it comes to shaping your character in whatever wacky way you see fit. After you receive the mission, you'll start being introduced to your crew members, and this is where those character choices start to play a factor into your gameplay. Based on your background and traits, you'll see that sometimes new dialogue options are available, and while they certainly can color your conversations, your dialogue choices can leave lasting impressions on the people you interact with, and those could have ramifications down the line. The gameplay really breaks down into 3 different experiences, all of which the game seamlessly balances. At certain points, you'll engage in a lot of narrative exposition, talking to NPCs, learning about their backgrounds, and hopefully this leads to a lot of gameplay opportunities. We didn't really see that payoff in the hour we had access to, but we wouldn't expect it to. Then there's the exploration, which has always been a central part of Obsidian Entertainment's identity. Within each area, you'll find yourself looking at every object, checking every corner for something to loot. The team takes this a step further with the introduction of the observation skill, which allows you to identify hidden objects within the game world. Exploration is central to the game's environmental storytelling, but also how they present puzzles and secrets to the player. Based on your skills and perks, you'll have access to different elements within the game world, and that may lead to certain opportunities and loot. And how you build your character will directly impact what you can and can't interact with. Obviously, we were in a pretty confined part of the game, playing through the first mission, but once the experience opens up, you'll have a lot more freedom to explore different parts of the various galaxies and explore to your heart's content. I do want to point out that we still don't know how big The Outer Worlds 2 is. Obsidian has been pretty steadfast in their commitment to the semi-open world concept, and I don't expect that to change here. My guess is that the game will follow the same hub and limited world model of the previous game, but hopefully with an eye towards more seamless experiences and as few load screens as possible. Now, that final pillar of gameplay is the combat, which is a mixture of both melee and ranged. The Outer Worlds 2 is very clearly going to lean even more into its fantasy core with more science-based weapons, and quite honestly, I can't wait to see that. The first game did the same thing, but truthfully, until we got to the DLC, I don't think The Outer Worlds embraced that space opera moniker. This time, make no mistake about it, the game isn't trying to take itself too seriously, and that was apparent from the reveal trailer. During our preview, we really only got a sampling of combat. We had access to just a couple different basic weapons, but we did get a sense for how all of the pieces will eventually come together. What was most noticeable for me was the movement, which felt more refined than in the previous game. Some might find it a bit floaty and embellished, but I think it actually works really well for this game, and plays much faster and smoother than The Outer Worlds ever did, and I think things fall more in line with our modern expectations of FPS movement. The gunplay, well, quite honestly, there's no opinion to form when you only have access to a pistol and a semi-automatic rifle, but I will say, things feel pretty tight.
There's nothing more we can do now.
Continue your
It plays a bit faster than the original Outer Worlds, and I think that's only going to get faster when you have a full arsenal of weapons and gear, and once you add in your companion, you can guarantee the chaos is going to be dialed up to 11. But until we have the chance to experience all of that ourselves, we're not going to render judgment. What I am excited to check out are the different weapon mods and how that system has changed, if at all, since the first game. We can see on base weapons like our repeating rifle that there are 3 mod slots for barrel, add-on, and optics, and while the first game had a mod system, I think this one area is where the game can really expand. With just an hour of very early game content under our belts, I think it's safe to say we haven't seen nearly enough of the game to judge it. But what I will say is that my initial excitement for The Outer Worlds 2 has really only increased since playing through the preview. I love the first game, and fully expect to love the second game, especially because they're leaning into the wacky parts of the original title that I enjoyed so much, creating a full-blown space opera in the process. I am a little skeptical about the depth of the various systems, and to be honest, Obsidian has always shied away from creating overly complex and intricate nuances within their games. A perfect example is how the health and healing systems work. As you scavenge food, it just ends up in a general pool of healing items, and by tapping Z on your keyboard, you can quickly use whatever item is next in that pool's queue. It's super convenient, but ends up creating a bland experience. Food, as colorful and interesting as it might sound within the world, all feeds into the same boring healing system, so you end up losing that uniqueness. Again, we have to see how these things play out, but it's something I'm definitely keeping an eye on. Friends, we don't have to wait long for The Outer Worlds 2 to be released. The game is scheduled to launch on October 29th for PC, Xbox and Game Pass, and PlayStation, and you better believe we'll be covering this one top to bottom with a review and then tons of guides, so be sure to subscribe so you can catch all those videos in your feed. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.